What if I told you Stoicism isn't just about enduring life's hardships, silently gritting your teeth through pain or frustration, but actually holds the key to becoming the kind of man women are naturally drawn to? Think about that for a second. This ancient philosophy, often misunderstood as cold or emotionless, is really about mastering yourself so deeply that your confidence, purpose, and resilience become irresistible. It's not about playing games or pretending to be someone you're not. It's about embodying qualities that make you undeniably attractive, not just in dating, but in every area of life. Picture a guy who used to overthink every text, panic before dates, and tie his self-worth to whether a woman liked him back. Then he discovered Stoicism. He stopped chasing approval and started living by principles, owning his emotions, leading with purpose, and refusing to let rejection shake his core. Suddenly, women weren't just responding differently, they were initiating, leaning in, wanting to be part of his world. Why? Because he'd stopped seeking validation and started radiating the kind of unshakable energy that pulls people in naturally. That's the power of these principles. Over the next 25 laws, we're going to break down exactly how Stoicism transforms not just how you think, but how you move through the world, how you communicate, handle setbacks, and carry yourself in a way that makes you magnetic. This isn't about manipulation or superficial tricks. It's about building a version of yourself so grounded, so intentional, that attraction becomes a side effect of the life you're already living. Whether you're struggling with confidence, stuck in a cycle of dating frustration, or just ready to elevate your presence, these laws are your blueprint. Let's dive in. The first law separates the men who chase women from the men women chase, mastering your emotions. Think about Marcus Aurelius ruling an empire in chaos, surrounded by betrayal and war, yet never losing his composure. That same unshakable calm is what draws women in today, not because you're suppressing feelings, but because you're in control of them. A guy who panics when a text goes unanswered or lashes out when things don't go his way radiates insecurity. But a man who stays centered, that's magnetic. Take a modern example: two men on a date. One gets visibly annoyed when the waiter messes up the order, his mood souring the evening. The other laughs it off, redirects the conversation, and keeps the energy light. Who would you rather spend time with? Women aren't attracted to perfection, they're attracted to emotional stability. When you're not tossed around by every little setback, you create a space where others feel safe, and that's irresistible. This isn't about being emotionless. Stoicism teaches you to acknowledge feelings without being ruled by them. Imagine a guy who gets rejected but shrugs it off with genuine confidence, knowing his worth isn't tied to one person's opinion. That kind of resilience screams strength. Women sense it instantly, the difference between someone who needs validation and someone who's already complete. Emotional mastery isn't about hiding vulnerability. It's about choosing when and how to express it from a place of power, not neediness. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. That strength is what women respond to. When you're grounded in your purpose, unshaken by drama or approval seeking, you become the kind of man who doesn't have to chase because what you've built within yourself is worth chasing. Imagine standing in front of an ice-cold shower, hesitating, knowing that stepping in will be a shock to your system. Now imagine doing it anyway, not because you have to, but because you choose to. That's the essence of the second law, embracing discomfort. The Stoics called it voluntary hardship, and it's one of the most powerful ways to build the kind of confidence that doesn't just look good, it feels unshakable. This isn't about punishment or masochism. It's about training yourself to face life's inevitable challenges with the same calm determination you'd bring to that cold shower. Think about it. What's more attractive? A guy who avoids discomfort at all costs, panicking when things don't go smoothly, or one who leans into challenges with a relaxed smile? Women aren't drawn to convenience, they're drawn to men who handle difficulty with grace because that signals something deeper: resilience, adaptability, and the kind of strength that can't be faked. Take approaching women. For most guys, the fear of rejection is paralyzing. But what if you reframed it as practice? Every time you strike up a conversation, whether it leads to a date or not, you're not just building social skills. You're proving to yourself that discomfort won't break you, and that's the key. Charisma isn't about having the perfect line. It's about the quiet assurance that comes from knowing you faced harder things and survived. The Stoics didn't just preach this, they lived it. Seneca, one of history's wealthiest men, would sleep on the floor and wear threadbare clothes periodically, not because he had to, but to remind himself that comfort wasn't his master. Fast forward to today, the guy who trains in the gym when he's tired, who starts conversations even when he's nervous, who chooses growth over ease, that's the guy who stands out. Here's the secret: discomfort is a signal, not a stop sign. Your brain screams, avoid this, because it's wired for survival, not excellence. But every time you push through, you rewire that instinct. You stop seeing challenge as a threat and start seeing it as an opportunity. And that shift changes everything. Women notice it in the way you carry yourself, the ease in your posture, the lack of desperation in your voice. You're not trying to impress anymore, you're too busy growing, so start small. Take the stairs instead of the elevator. Hold eye contact a second longer than feels natural. Strike up a conversation with a stranger, not to get a number, but to remind yourself that you can. Each time you do, you're not just building confidence, you're becoming the kind of man who doesn't need to chase, because you've already won the only race that matters, the one against your former self. There's a reason why certain men walk into a room and instantly command attention, not because they're the loudest or flashiest, but because they're anchored to something deeper than approval. This is the power of living with purpose, the third law of Stoic attraction. Seneca didn't write letters obsessing over whether people liked him. He wrote about virtue, justice, and how to live meaningfully. That unwavering focus didn't just make him influential, it made him magnetic. Women, like everyone else, are drawn to men who are pulled by something greater than fleeting validation. Think about the difference between two guys on a date. One mirrors her opinions, laughs too hard at every joke, and subtly molds himself to fit what he thinks she wants. The other speaks with quiet conviction, listens genuinely but doesn't perform, and carries himself like a man who'd be fine whether the date went well or not. Who leaves the stronger impression? Purpose isn't about having your entire life mapped out. It's about having a North Star, a set of principles or goals that guide you, so you're never reduced to just seeking someone else's approval. History's most compelling men, from Marcus Aurelius to modern leaders, weren't preoccupied with being liked. They were too busy building, creating, or serving something larger than themselves. That's the paradox. When you're not desperate for attention, you become more interesting. Women sense this instinctively. A man who's chasing validation is like a flickering light, unreliable, draining. But a man rooted in purpose, he's a steady flame, and people naturally gravitate toward his warmth. This doesn't mean you need some grand, world-changing mission. Purpose can be as simple as a commitment to growth, to treating people with respect, or to mastering your craft. The key is that it comes from within, not from external praise. Picture a musician who plays for the love of music, not applause. There's an authenticity to his passion that's contagious. That same energy applies to how you live your life. When you're driven by inner fire, not external rewards, you stop bending yourself to fit others' expectations, and ironically, that's when you become truly appealing. The Stoics warned against becoming a slave to applause. When you tie your worth to others' opinions, you hand them control over your happiness. But when you live with purpose, rejection loses its sting. A woman's disinterest doesn't devastate you because your sense of value isn't mortgaged to her approval. That kind of emotional independence is rare. and it's catnip to people who crave genuine connection over empty flattery. So ask yourself, if no one was watching, what would you still care about? What principles would you uphold even if no one praised you for them? That's where your purpose lies. And when you live from that place, you won't have to chase attraction, it'll find you. Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." That principle cuts straight to the heart of the fourth law, practicing detachment in love and dating. This isn't about becoming cold or indifferent. It's about understanding the difference between cherishing someone and clinging to them, a distinction that separates confident, grounded men from those who suffocate attraction with neediness. Picture two men in the early stages of dating. One texts constantly, analyzing every delayed reply, rearranging his schedule at the first sign of her interest, and bending his personality to match her preferences. The other engages warmly but maintains his rhythm, prioritizing his gym sessions, his work, his friendships, because his happiness isn't outsourced to her attention. Who do you think she finds more intriguing? Detachment isn't a lack of care, it's a quiet assurance that your worth isn't negotiable. The Stoics called this the dichotomy of control. You can't control whether someone texts back, how they feel about you, or whether a date goes well. But you can control how you show up, your honesty, your effort, your ability to walk away without bitterness when something isn't right. That shift in focus changes everything. Neediness repels because it signals desperation. A man who sees a woman as the source of his happiness rather than a complement to it. Detachment attracts because it radiates wholeness. Think of it like holding sand. Clench your fist too tightly and it spills through your fingers. Keep your hand open and the sand stays. Relationships thrive in the same way. The guy who demands constant reassurance, who panics when plans change, who molds himself to fit someone else's expectations. He's squeezing too hard, but the man who enjoys connection without clinging, he creates space for genuine desire to grow. Epictetus trained his students to rehearse loss, to remind themselves that everything they loved could be taken away. That sounds harsh, but its purpose was freedom, to love deeply while recognizing that nothing outside you is permanent. Apply this to dating, and suddenly rejection loses its fangs. A woman's disinterest doesn't devastate you because you were never dependent on her validation to begin with. Modern dating thrives on games, playing hard to get, mirroring behavior, manipulating attention. Stoic detachment cuts through that noise. It's not a tactic, it's a way of being. When you stop treating every interaction as a test of your worth, you communicate something rare, that you're a man who chooses, not a man who chases. And that's the kind of energy women can't ignore. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." That simple truth holds the key to the 5th law, speaking less and listening more. This isn't about playing it cool or feigning interest. It's about understanding that real connection isn't built on clever lines or monologues, but on the space you create for someone else to feel truly heard. Consider how most men approach conversations with women. They're so focused on what to say next, crafting the perfect response, steering the dialogue toward approval, that they miss what's happening right in front of them. Active listening isn't just waiting for your turn to talk. It's about giving someone your full attention without agenda, so they feel seen in a way that's rare. And that's magnetic. Women don't fall for men who perform, they fall for men who make them feel understood. Take a typical first date. One guy dominates the conversation, name-dropping accomplishments, steering every topic back to himself. The other asks thoughtful questions, follows up on details she mentions, and leaves pauses for her to fill. Which one leaves her thinking, "I've never met someone who gets me like this"? Silence isn't awkward when it's intentional. It's an invitation, one that says, "I'm genuinely curious about you." The Stoics practiced this deliberately. They called it the discipline of assent, pausing before reacting, absorbing before speaking. In modern dating, that translates to resisting the urge to fill every silence with noise. When a woman shares something personal, the strongest response isn't always a story of your own. Sometimes it's a nod, a thoughtful "tell me more," or even comfortable quiet. That's where trust builds. Here's the paradox: the less you try to impress, the more impressive you become. A man who listens without interrupting, who remembers the small things she mentioned weeks later, who makes her laugh not with rehearsed jokes but by reflecting her own humor back to her, that's the man who stands out. Because in a world where everyone's shouting to be heard, the rarest gift is someone who listens like what you say matters. Zeno's wisdom wasn't just about etiquette, it was about power. The person who controls the conversation isn't the one talking the most, it's the one guiding it through questions and presence. When you master that, you don't just become a better conversationalist. You become the kind of man women want to keep talking to long after the date is over. The Stoics had a radical concept called amor fati, the love of fate. It wasn't about passively accepting failure. It was about embracing every misstep, every rejection, every awkward moment as fuel for growth. And here's why this matters in dating. Women can smell shame from a mile away, but they're drawn to men who own their stumbles with unshakable self-assurance. Picture two guys after a bad date. One spirals into self-pity, deleting the dating app in frustration, convinced he's bad at this. The other laughs it off, texts a friend, "Well, that was a disaster," and moves on, treating it as just another chapter in his story. Who would you respect more? Think of Marcus Aurelius facing military defeats not with denial but with steely resolve to learn. Now apply that to modern dating. Maybe you fumbled a conversation, came on too strong, or misread signals. The Stoic response: no groveling apologies, no desperate second chances, just a quiet acknowledgement. That didn't go well. What can I take from it? That's the kind of maturity that turns failures into a law. Women don't expect perfection, they crave honesty. A man who can say, "I messed up," without crumbling shows he's secure enough to handle life's messes, including hers. Here's the secret: owning your failures isn't about confessing every flaw up front. It's about carrying yourself like someone who knows setbacks don't define you. Take a guy who spills his drink on a first date. The insecure version panics, over-apologizing, letting it derail the evening. The Stoic version, he grins, grabs a napkin, and deadpans. "And here I promised I wouldn't embarrass myself tonight." That effortless humor comes from a place of true self-acceptance, a vibe that's irresistibly attractive. Nietzsche, who borrowed amor fati from the Stoics, wrote, "That which does not kill me makes me stronger." In dating, that strength isn't about pretending nothing phases you. It's about radiating the quiet confidence of a man who's been knocked down before and always gets back up, not for her approval, but because that's who you are. When you stop fearing failure, you stop needing validation, and that's when you become the kind of man women can't help but chase. Consider the irony of a man who seems completely unfazed when a woman doesn't text back, not because he's aloof or playing games, but because he genuinely has better things to focus on. That's the power of cultivated indifference, the seventh law of Stoic attraction. The ancient Stoics called this the dichotomy of control, understanding that some things, like how others perceive you, are beyond your command, while your own actions and mindset are entirely within it. This isn't about apathy, it's about redirecting your energy toward what you can influence and letting go of what you can't. And here's the twist: when you stop clinging to outcomes, you become infinitely more appealing. Think about the last time you watched someone desperately try to impress a crowd, laughing too loud at their own jokes, scrambling for approval. Now contrast that with the person who seemed perfectly content whether the crowd responded or not. Which one commanded respect? Desperation is repellent because it telegraphs a lack of options, a scarcity mindset. But indifference rooted in true self-assurance signals abundance. Women, like anyone else, are drawn to people who aren't emotionally dependent on their reactions. Take dating apps. One guy sends a flurry of follow-up messages after no reply, his anxiety leaking through the screen. Another sends one thoughtful opener, then moves on, his feed filled with hobbies, friends, and projects that excite him regardless of who swipes right. Who seems like the prize? Indifference isn't about ignoring someone. It's about refusing to let their choices dictate your self-worth. The Stoics practiced this through negative visualization, imagining loss before it happened to appreciate what they had without clinging to it. Apply that to dating and suddenly, rejection isn't a blow to your ego, it's just data. Here's where most men get it wrong. They think indifference means acting cold or disengaged. Real Stoic indifference is warmth without neediness. It's the ability to enjoy a woman's company while knowing you'll be fine without it. Picture a first date where the guy isn't nervously monitoring her reactions but genuinely enjoying the conversation, unbothered by whether it leads to a second one. That relaxed confidence is magnetic because it's not a performance, it's the result of a man who's anchored to something deeper than validation. Epictetus put it bluntly, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. In modern terms, if you're afraid to text first, to risk rejection, or to walk away from a mismatch, you're handing over your power. Cultivated indifference is the antidote. It's not that you don't care, it's that you care more about your own standards than anyone else's opinion. And that's the kind of man women chase. Cotto the Younger walked through the streets of Rome with his head held high, not because he sought admiration, but because he'd rather die than compromise his principles. When Julius Caesar offered him power, wealth, even marriage to his own niece to secure his loyalty, Cotto refused, knowing it would cost him everything. That's the kind of moral backbone that doesn't just command respect, it becomes legendary. Fast forward 2,000 years and nothing's changed. Women still crave men who stand unshaken in their integrity, not as a performance but as an unbreakable way of being. This is the 8th law, leading with virtue, not the sanitized, polite version of goodness, but the Stoic kind courage that faces discomfort, justice that demands fairness even when no one's watching, and a code so deeply ingrained that compromise isn't an option. Think about the last time you met someone who radiated that kind of quiet strength. Not the guy who boasts about his morals, but the one who simply lives them, who speaks up when others stay silent, who keeps his word even when it's inconvenient, who treats the waiter with the same respect as his boss. That's virtue in action, and here's the paradox. When you stop trying to impress people with your character and just embody it, you become the kind of man women trust instinctively. Trust isn't built on grand gestures, it's built on 1,000 small moments where you choose principle over convenience. Take dating. One guy tells a woman what she wants to hear, mirroring her beliefs to avoid conflict. Another respectfully disagrees when his values are challenged, not to provoke but because he respects her enough to be honest, who leaves the lasting impression. Women aren't drawn to men who bend with every breeze. They're drawn to men who stand like oaks rooted in something deeper than approval. Cotto didn't win allies by being agreeable, he won reverence by being relentlessly true to his convictions. That same unwavering clarity applied to modern relationships creates a magnetism that superficial charm can't replicate. The Stoics divided virtue into 4 pillars: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. In love and life, this isn't about perfection, it's about direction. Wisdom means choosing partners who align with your values, not just your desires. Courage is expressing interest without fear of rejection, or walking away when something disrespects your boundaries. Justice is treating others as ends in themselves, not means to an end, never manipulating or deceiving to get what you want. And temperance, that's the discipline to pursue passion without being enslaved by it. Here's the secret most men miss: virtue isn't a tactic, it's a reputation. When women know you're the guy who does what's right, not what's easy, they don't just respect you, they feel safe with you, and safety is the foundation of attraction. Picture two men. One posts thirst traps, name drops connections, and exaggerates his achievements. The other underpromises and overdelivers, shows up when he says he will, and owns his mistakes without excuses. Who would you bet on long term? Character isn't just attractive, it's predictive. A woman can't help but notice the man whose actions match his words, because in a world full of performances, authenticity stands out. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." That's the punchline. Leading with virtue isn't about earning points, it's about becoming someone who doesn't need to. When your life is aligned with principles deeper than validation, you stop chasing and start choosing. And that's when women start chasing you. Ever notice how some men seem to attract drama wherever they go, blaming their dating struggles on bad luck, toxic women, or the game being rigged? Now compare that to the guy who hits setbacks without collapsing into self-pity, who owns his missteps even when life throws curveballs. That's the 9th law, rejecting victimhood. The Stoics didn't waste time complaining about circumstances. They focused on their response because they knew that resilience, not excuses, is what builds real respect and attraction. Picture two men after a tough breakup. One rants on social media about how women only want bad boys, framing himself as the wronged hero. The other reflects quietly, what could I have done differently? What lessons can I carry forward? The difference isn't just maturity, it's magnetism. Women aren't drawn to men who see themselves as passive victims of fate. They're drawn to men who take agency, even when life isn't fair. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire plagued by war and betrayal, yet his journals never descend into self-pity. Instead, he wrote, "The obstacle is the way," a reminder that our power lies not in what happens to us, but in how we choose to meet it. Here's the hard truth: victimhood is a choice. You can't control rejection, ghosting, or bad dates, but you can control whether you internalize them as proof of your inadequacy or fuel for growth. Take online dating. One guy gets few matches and concludes women are too shallow. Another audits his profile, sharpening his photos, refining his bio, treating each swipe as a chance to improve. Who do you think eventually succeeds? Responsibility isn't about self-flagellation. It's about recognizing that while you didn't choose the obstacle, you alone choose how to overcome it. This isn't just philosophy, it's biology. Women are wired to seek partners who can handle adversity without crumbling, because that signals stability for the future. Think of a job interview. The candidate who blames past failures on terrible bosses raises red flags, while the one who discusses lessons learned earns trust. Dating works the same way. The man who shrugs off rejection with "her loss, I'll try again tomorrow" communicates a mindset that's rare and compelling. Modern culture often confuses victimhood with vulnerability. Stoicism doesn't teach you to suppress pain. It teaches you to process it without letting it define you. Epictetus, born a slave, could have blamed his suffering on others. Instead, he declared, "No one can hurt you unless you let them." That's the core of this law. When you stop outsourcing blame, you reclaim power. And power, not the controlling kind, but the quiet confidence of a man who masters his own narrative, is irresistibly attractive. So next time life knocks you down, ask the Stoic question: what's within my control right now? Maybe it's hitting the gym instead of drowning in resentment. Maybe it's sending one more message after 3 unanswered ones. Small actions build the muscle of resilience, and that's the muscle women notice first. Because at the end of the day, they're not looking for a man life hasn't tested. They're looking for one who's been tested and comes out stronger. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who trained Epictetus, didn't just preach mental discipline. He hammered the connection between a man's outer appearance and his inner self-respect. While other philosophers debated abstract ideas, Rufus made his students sweat literally. He believed physical neglect was a form of self-contempt, writing, "How can a man who hasn't mastered his own body claim to master his mind?" That's the heart of the 10th law. Controlling your appearance isn't about vanity. It's about signaling self-worth through the most visible language humans understand. Think of it like this: when a man walks into a room with slumped shoulders, unkempt hair, and clothes that scream, "I gave up," he's broadcasting a message before he even speaks. Women, like everyone else, are hardwired to notice. It's not about having movie star looks or expensive suits. It's about the quiet confidence of someone who treats himself like he matters. The guy who stands tall, dresses with intention, and maintains basic grooming isn't just appealing aesthetically. He's communicating discipline, and discipline is magnetic. Take two men at a coffee shop. One's in wrinkled sweatpants, scrolling mindlessly, his energy slumped into the chair. The other wears clean, fitted clothes, sits with open posture, and moves like he's aware of the space he occupies. Who seems more approachable? Posture alone is a silent power move. Research shows upright posture doesn't just make you look more confident, it actually increases testosterone and reduces cortisol. The Stoics knew this instinctively. Your body isn't separate from your philosophy. It's the first draft of it. Fitness for Rufus wasn't about six-pack abs. It was about functional strength, the kind that lets you carry life's burdens without buckling. Modern science backs this. Regular exercise boosts dopamine and resilience, both of which radiate in your demeanor. A man who trains consistently doesn't just look better, he carries himself like someone who keeps promises to himself, and that's what women notice, not the size of your biceps, but the consistency behind them. Here's where most men miss the mark. They assume caring about appearance contradicts Stoic indifference. Wrong. Stoicism teaches control over what's within your power, and your hygiene, posture, and health absolutely are. The goal isn't to obsess over mirrors, but to refuse to let negligence undermine your potential. Think of Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire yet still wrote reminders to stand straight, not for others' approval, but because how you hold yourself changes how you think. Practical tip: start with the micro. Iron that wrinkled shirt. Stand like your spine's suspended by a string. Shave or groom your beard with the same intentionality you'd bring to a morning meditation. These aren't superficial acts, they're daily votes for self-respect. And when you treat yourself like someone worth respecting, others follow suit. As Rufus put it, a philosopher's body should match his words. Yours doesn't need perfection, just the quiet pride of a man who knows his exterior reflects his interior. And that's a man women can't ignore. Marcus Aurelius faced barbarian invasions, political betrayals, and a plague that killed millions, yet his private journals reveal a mind as steady as a mountain in a storm. "You have power over your mind, not outside events," he wrote, a principle that separates reactive boys from unshakable men. This isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about mastering them so thoroughly that chaos becomes your proving ground. Women don't crave a man who never feels stress, they're drawn to the one who handles it with such calm authority that he becomes their anchor in turbulence. Think about the last heated argument you witnessed. One person shouts, deflects blame, or crumbles under pressure. The other listens, pauses before responding, and refuses to let the storm inside him match the one outside. Who commands respect? Conflict is inevitable, but escalation is optional. Aurelius ruled Rome during its most violent era, yet never let his inner peace be collateral damage. That same discipline applies when a date turns tense, when misunderstandings arise, or when life throws curveballs. The man who remains centered isn't just avoiding drama, he's proving he can safeguard not just his own emotions, but hers too. Picture a couple debating where to move for his job. The anxious version bulldozes her concerns, his voice rising with frustration. The stoic version leans in, acknowledges her fears, and says, "Tell me what worries you most, we'll figure this out together." That shift from combat to collaboration doesn't weaken him. It reveals strength women recognize instinctively. Calm isn't passive, it's control channeled into connection. Here's where most men fail. They mistake calm for indifference. Stoic serenity isn't stone-faced detachment. It's the space between stimulus and response where wisdom lives. When a woman vents about her day, the insecure man interrupts with fixes or jokes to diffuse discomfort. The grounded man lets her speak, then responds with measured warmth. That sounds exhausting. What do you need right now? That's the difference between reacting and leading. Modern neuroscience backs this. The amygdala, your brain's panic button, hijacks reason under stress. But the prefrontal cortex, home to logic and empathy, can override it with practice. Aurelius trained this daily, writing reminders like, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." In dating terms, when she tests your patience, the win isn't lashing out, it's showing her what emotional mastery looks like. Practical tip: next time tension flares, borrow a Stoic pause. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 6. That tiny window disrupts panic's momentum. Notice how arguments de-escalate when you refuse to meet chaos with chaos. Women remember men who made them feel safe, not just desired, because at its core, unshakable calm isn't a tactic. It's the ultimate proof you're built for more than fair weather. And that's irresistible. Gossip is the junk food of conversation, easy to consume, addictive in the moment, but ultimately leaving you empty and diminished. The Stoics warned against it fiercely. Epictetus said, if someone speaks badly of you, instead of defending yourself, prove them wrong through your actions. That's more than just advice, it's a social superpower. High-value men don't waste energy dissecting others' flaws or trading rumors because they understand something fundamental. When you speak about people, you reflect their world. When you speak about ideas, you invite others into yours. Picture 2 men at a dinner party. One leans in, whispering about who's dating whom, who got fired, whose reputation is crumbling. The other steers the discussion toward philosophy, travel, or a fascinating book he just read. Who walks away with more respect? Gossip might feel like bonding in the moment, but it's a currency that devalues everyone who trades in it. Women and people in general are drawn to those who elevate a room, not those who reduce it to petty drama. Marcus Aurelius kept a private journal filled with reflections on virtue, resilience, and self-mastery, not rants about troublesome senators or petty court intrigues. That restraint wasn't accidental. He knew that what you focus on expands and what you ignore withers. Apply that to modern social dynamics. The man who refuses to engage in gossip isn't just avoiding negativity. He's training himself to see the world through a lens of growth rather than judgment. Here's the paradox: avoiding gossip doesn't make you aloof, it makes you more approachable. Think about it. When someone knows you won't twist their words or spread their secrets, they feel safe around you. That safety builds trust, and trust is the foundation of deeper connections. A woman sharing her dreams with you isn't worried they'll become tomorrow's cocktail party chatter. That's how you transition from being just another guy in the room to someone she seeks out. Practical tip: next time a conversation veers into gossip, pivot with curiosity. Instead of fueling speculation about a mutual acquaintance's divorce, ask, what's something you've learned about relationships from watching others? Shift from tearing down to building up. The Stoics called this process mindful attention to your speech. Every word you choose is a brick in the foundation of your character, and character, not chatter, is what makes a man unforgettable. Imagine 2 men inheriting equal fortunes. One spends his days chasing luxury, expensive dinners, fleeting flings, the rush of impulse buys. The other invests in skills, meaningful connections, and experiences that compound over decades. Who would you bet on at 70, not just financially, but in the richness of his life? This is the heart of the 13th law, treating time as currency more valuable than gold, and pleasure as the occasional spice, never the main course. The Stoics didn't hate enjoyment, they hated anything that mortgaged the future for momentary highs. Seneca put it bluntly: you're dying every day, and yet you live as if immortality were guaranteed. Now flip that to modern dating. One guy burns weekends binge drinking with buddies, scrolling aimlessly, or chasing cheap validation from strangers online. The other dedicates mornings to the gym, afternoons to mastering a craft, evenings to deepening friendships, and still enjoys nights out but with intention. Who do women instinctively see as husband material? Not because he's boring, but because he radiates the rarest modern luxury, self-respect forged through how he spends his hours. Epicureanism gets misread as eat, drink, be merry, but even Epicurus warned against pleasures that create future pain. The difference, Stoics take it further, viewing time as the one resource you can't replenish. Every hour wasted on trivial drama or hollow distractions is an hour stolen from your potential. That's why Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Stop letting your hands be slaves to your impulses." In dating terms, the man who cancels a Netflix marathon to prepare for a career-defining presentation isn't depriving himself. He's building the kind of life women want to join. Here's where most men slip. They confuse pleasure with happiness, mistaking temporary dopamine hits for lasting fulfillment. A first date at a trendy cocktail bar might impress superficially, but compare that to a hike where conversation flows effortlessly against a sunset. One's about performance, the other creates shared memory. Women notice the difference. A man who plans dates around experiences rather than consumption, cooking together instead of expensive restaurants. Bookstores over nightclubs signals depth without saying a word. Practical shift: audit your week like a Stoic accountant. How many hours vanish into passive consumption versus active growth? That doesn't mean eliminating fun, it means upgrading it. Swap 2 hours of video games for a language lesson. Trade gossip sessions for chess matches. Small choices compound. Over months, you won't just have more to offer, you'll be more. And that's what separates the man women flirt with from the one they fight to keep. The irony: indulgence often stems from fear of boredom, loneliness, or facing the void of untapped potential. Stoic time mastery is the antidote. When you fill your days with purpose, pleasure loses its desperate grip. You enjoy fine wine without needing it, savor romance without clinging to it. That's the balance women sense, a man who could party all night but chooses not to. Not out of restriction, but because he's too invested in becoming someone remarkable. And that's irresistible. Seneca woke up each morning and did something radical for a man of his stature. He wrote down what he was grateful for. Not grand achievements or wealth, but simple gifts, a friend's loyalty, a lesson learned, even the warmth of sunlight. This wasn't just journaling, it was armor against entitlement, a daily reminder that abundance isn't about having more but appreciating what's already yours. And here's why this matters in attraction. Women can smell neediness from miles away, but they're magnetized by men who radiate gratitude, not as a performance but as a way of seeing the world. Picture 2 men on a date. One complains about his job, subtly fishing for pity or praise. The other mentions his work with a chuckle. "Sure, it's demanding, but I get to solve problems that matter," before turning the conversation to her passions. Who leaves the stronger impression? Gratitude isn't about pretending life's perfect. It's about focusing on the light instead of cursing the dark. That shift in perspective changes your energy entirely. A man who appreciates his health, his friendships, even his past heartbreaks for what they taught him, that's the kind of depth that makes women lean in. The Stoics practiced gratitude with brutal honesty. Seneca wrote letters reflecting on loss, not to wallow, but to viscerally feel how temporary everything is. Try this modern twist. Next time you're frustrated by a delayed text or a cancelled date, pause and ask, what if this never happened again? Suddenly, the mundane feels precious. That's the secret weapon of grateful men. They don't take people or moments for granted, and women sense that reverence in every interaction. Here's where most men miss the mark. They think showering a woman with compliments is gratitude. Real gratitude starts long before she enters the picture. It's how you talk about your life when no one's listening. The guy who bitches about traffic versus the one who pops on a podcast and enjoys the downtime. The one who resents his ex versus the one who acknowledges, "She taught me what I won't tolerate next time." Women hear these micro stories and instantly know, this is a man who won't treat her like a future regret. Practical shift tonight. Borrow Seneca's ritual. List 3 specific things you're grateful for that didn't go your way. Maybe a rejection that steered you toward a better fit, a failure that forced growth. Even discomfort that thickened your skin. This isn't toxic positivity, it's alchemy turning lead into wisdom. And wisdom, worn lightly, is the quietest form of confidence. Because when you stop acting like the world owes you, you start living like you owe the world your best, and that's the man women chase. Epictetus, born a slave, had one possession no one could take, his ability to say no. When a student begged him for more time, more lessons, more access, the Stoic master replied, "Do you think I'd let you treat my body the way you treat your mind?" That single question sliced through entitlement like a blade. This is the 15th law. Boundaries aren't just fences to keep others out, they're the foundation of self-respect that makes you magnetic. Women don't fall for men who people please, they're drawn to those who draw lines with calm conviction. Think of 2 men in relationships. One cancels plans with friends, the second his girlfriend texts, afraid to disappoint. The other smiles and says, "I'd love to see you, let's plan for Tuesday." Tonight's already committed. Who commands deeper attraction? Weak boundaries scream desperation. A man who trades his dignity for approval. Strong boundaries whisper something far more compelling. "I value my time, my energy, and myself too much to bargain for your affection." The Stoics called this proherses, the power to choose what you will and won't accept. But here's where most men stumble. They confuse boundaries with aggression, either erupting in anger or swallowing resentment. Epictetus taught the middle path. If someone hands you a cup of disrespect, don't drink it, just set it down. Practical example, a date interrupts you repeatedly. The reactive version snaps, "Do you ever let anyone finish?" The Stoic version waits, then says with a smile, "I want to hear your thoughts, let me finish mine first." Same message, different energy. One creates tension, the other teaches respect without raising his voice. Disrespect often tests boundaries in micro-doses, late-night booty calls, last-minute cancellations, passive-aggressive digs. The modern Stoic doesn't lecture or plead, he acts. When she flakes for the 3rd time, he stops rescheduling. When conversations turn toxic, he exits gracefully. "This doesn't work for me." Wish you the best, no drama, no second chances, just quiet consistency. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You don't have to turn this into something, it doesn't have to upset you." Women notice this unshakable composure. It's not that you're rigid, you're simply beyond negotiation when it comes to your peace. History's most respected men, from Cotto to Mandela, weren't loved because they accommodated everyone. They were revered because their no meant something. Apply this to dating. The man who agrees to everything is forgettable. The man who declines with grace. Unforgettable because boundaries aren't walls, they're invitations. They say, "This is how you earn a place in my life." And that's the ultimate attraction hack. Letting her know the privilege isn't being with you, it's being chosen by you. The Stoics reserved their harshest criticism for one type of man, the talker who never translates words into deeds. Epictetus mocked those who philosophize with their lips while their lives remain unchanged. And 2,000 years later, nothing kills attraction faster than the gap between what a man says and what he does. This is the 16th law. Action isn't just more convincing than words. It's the only language that builds real trust and desire. Women don't fall for poetry, they fall for patterns. A guy who texts, "I'll take you somewhere amazing next week," then flakes, forgettable. The one who quietly makes reservations, shows up early, and lets the evening unfold without fanfare. Unforgettable. Take 2 men pursuing the same woman. One bombards her with grand declarations. "You're unlike anyone I've ever met. I'd do anything for you," but cancels plans when something better comes up. The other says less but delivers more, remembers her favorite book, brings soup when she's sick, follows through on the smallest promises. Who earns her trust? Empty words create doubt, consistent actions build security, and security isn't the opposite of passion, it's the foundation. A woman can't fully relax into desire with a man whose words dangle like unkept promises. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. Apply that to dating. The man who says he's reliable is just noise. The man who is reliable, who texts when he lands safely after a trip, who shows up on time without reminders, who handles conflicts with calm accountability, becomes a gravitational force." Sexual tension thrives in this space between expectation and fulfillment. When she knows your actions will outpace your words, every interaction carries a charge of anticipation. Modern psychology backs this. The peak end rule shows people judge experiences based on their most intense moments and how they conclude. A dozen lavish dates mean nothing if you vanish when she needs you. But the guy who proves dependable in crisis, that's the stuff of loyalty and raw attraction. Think of the firefighter who jokes less but races into burning buildings. Or the writer who doesn't boast about his craft but publishes relentlessly. Women aren't seduced by potential, they're captivated by proof. Here's where most men screw up. They mistake communication for effort. Texting all day isn't connection, it's performance. Real effort is silent. It's the entrepreneur who blocks off weekends to recharge so he's fully present on dates. The artist who sketches her laugh instead of just complimenting it. The Stoics called this parrhesia, fearless honesty in action. Not "I'll change," but waking up early to hit the gym. Not "I miss you," but booking a flight when it matters. Practical shift for 1 week. Say nothing you can't back with immediate action. Replace "we should" with "let's," then follow through. Watch how her guard drops when your words and deeds align, because desire isn't sparked by what you promise, it's ignited by what you prove. Seneca once wrote a letter to his friend Lucilius with a radical proposition. He urged him to schedule regular appointments with the most neglected person in his life, himself. Not as punishment, but as sacred practice. Be a stranger to yourself, he warned, and soon everyone else will be too. This is the 17th law. Solitude isn't loneliness, it's the forge where you shape an identity so unshakable that women don't complete you, they're drawn to the gravity of your wholeness. Picture two men after a breakup. One floods his calendar with first dates, terrified of quiet nights. The other spends weekends hiking solo, refining his cooking skills, sitting with the discomfort until it becomes clarity. Who re-enters the dating pool with more magnetism? Neediness repels because it's a vacuum, sucking energy inward. Solitude, when chosen, radiates because it signals a man who's neither desperate nor aloof, just profoundly at home in his own skin. The Stoics didn't retreat from society, they fortified themselves to return to it stronger. Marcus Aurelius meditated in candlelit tents during military campaigns, not to escape his troops but to lead them with clearer vision. Modern translation: the guy who disappears for a Sunday morning journaling session isn't avoiding connection, he's ensuring the connections he makes aren't tainted by dependency. Women sense this instinctively. A man comfortable in silence, who doesn't scramble to fill pauses with nervous chatter, creates space for authenticity to flourish. Here's where most men misunderstand solitude. They equate it with isolation or worse, self-pity. True Stoic solitude is active, not passive. It's the difference between staring at a wall and sitting down to ask, "Who am I when no one's watching?" Seneca's letters describe Cecessus withdrawing not from life, but from the noise that drowns out your inner voice. Practical example: a guy who spends an hour before bed analyzing his day's wins and missteps rather than numbing out with social media isn't just building discipline. He's becoming the rarest kind of man, one who knows himself, Science backs this. fMRI studies show solitude increases self-referential thought, the brain's ability to process experiences and solidify identity. In dating terms, that means the man who regularly unplugs isn't just recharging, he's integrating his experiences into wisdom. Women don't fall for men who need constant distraction. They're captivated by the depth that comes from confronting the quiet. Think of Hemingway writing in Paris cafes or Miyamoto meditating before sword fights. Solitude wasn't escape, it was their competitive edge. Practical shift, start small. Take a lunch break without your phone, walk a new route without headphones, sit with the itch to reach for stimulation, and watch it pass. These micro moments train what the Stoics called autarkeia, self-sufficiency. Not the kind that pushes people away, but the kind that lets you choose connection from abundance, not lack. Because here's the secret women won't tell you. Nothing makes you more desirable than proving you don't need them to be happy, just wildly preferring their company. Seneca put it best, all those who call you to themselves draw you away from yourself. The man who masters solitude doesn't just attract women, he attracts the right ones, those who see his comfort in aloneness not as rejection, but as an invitation to meet him where he's already whole. And that's where real connection begins. Marcus Aurelius faced storms that could sink ships, political betrayals that could crush empires, and yet his journal carries this unshakable reminder. The obstacle is the way, turn every hindrance into raw material for your purpose. That's the essence of the 18th law. Mastering adaptability isn't just about rolling with punches, it's about transforming friction into fuel. In dating, rigidity is the quickest path to frustration, while fluidity, what the Stoics called the art of acquiescence, turns setbacks into secret advantages. Picture two men planning a first date. One meticulously scripts the evening 7 p.m. cocktails at the trendy bar, 8:30 dinner reservations, a romantic stroll by 10. When she texts last minute, actually, can we switch to coffee? I've got an early morning, he spirals. His voice tightens, his texts turn clipped. I put a lot of effort into this. The other responds within seconds, perfect. There's a great spot near you, the daily grind. Let's meet at 6. No sighing, no guilt trips, just effortless pivoting. Who seems more confident? Women don't care about your plans, they care about your ability to handle their reality without crumbling. The Stoics practiced this through premeditatio malorum, premeditating obstacles. Before a journey, they'd visualize storms, broken axles, thieves, not to dread them but to rehearse adaptation. Apply that to modern dating. The guy who mentally prepares for cancellations, delays, or mood shifts doesn't just survive chaos, he thrives in it. When she changes venues last minute, he's already scouted alternatives. When rain cancels their picnic, he's got a cozy bookstore in mind. That's not luck, it's trained flexibility. Epictetus, born a slave, framed it brutally. Want to live a happy life, want to be loved, then stop demanding certainty. Modern translation: the man who needs everything to go perfectly is the man who will always be disappointed. But the one who treats detours as adventures, he's the guy who makes even a delayed flight feel like part of the story. Women sense this instinctively. A rigid man feels like work, an adaptable one feels like freedom. Here's the subtle shift: adaptability isn't about being a pushover, it's about leading from a place of unshakable security. When she suggests sushi over your planned steakhouse, the insecure guy caves resentfully, fine, whatever. The Stoic version enthusiastically pivots, I've been meaning to try that new ramen spot. Let's do it, same outcome, radically different energy. One reeks of neediness, the other radiates abundance. Practical exercise, next time plans change, lean into the discomfort. If a date cancels, use the free night to call an old friend or finally start that podcast. Train your brain to see fluidity as opportunity, not betrayal. Because here's the secret women won't tell you: the man who handles plan B better than most handle plan A, that's the man they'll move mountains to see again. Aurelius wrote, "The cucumber is bitter, throw it away. There are brambles in your path, go around." In dating, as in life, the bitter cucumber isn't the problem. Your insistence that it be sweet is. Drop the script, master the pivot, and watch how effortlessly attraction follows. Marcus Aurelius would begin his mornings with a ruthless question: why do I care if strangers approve of me today? Not as self-doubt, but as armor against a trap that's crippled men for millennia, seeking validation like beggars chasing coins. This is the 19th law, and it's the antidote to the nice guy paradox. The harder you try to be liked, the less respect and attraction you inspire. Women don't fall for men who mold themselves into human mirrors, reflecting back whatever they think she wants to see. They're drawn to men who stand firm in their own truth, even when it risks disapproval. Take two guys at a party. One nods along to every opinion, laughs too loud at jokes he doesn't find funny, and scrambles to refill drinks the moment someone's glass dips below half. The other engages warmly but won't fake agreement. He'll challenge playfully. "Wait, you really think that movie was overrated?" I'd argue the cinematography alone makes it a classic. Who leaves the deeper impression? Approval seeking isn't kindness, it's insecurity in disguise. The Stoics called this the slavery of applause, when your worth becomes hostage to others' opinions. Marcus scribbled in his journals, "It's ridiculous to let someone else's words determine your inner state." Yet most men do exactly that, altering their personalities, suppressing their humor, or swallowing their boundaries just to avoid conflict or rejection. Here's the brutal irony: nice guys finish last not because they're too kind, but because their kindness is transactional. They're covert contracts. If I agree with her politics, she'll like me. If I pay for dinner, she'll owe me affection. Women detect this instinctively. It's not the generosity that repels, it's the unspoken expectation lurking beneath. Contrast that with the man who's genuinely considerate but unafraid to disagree, who holds the door because it aligns with his values, not because he's angling for a smile. That's the difference between neediness and nobility. Modern dating is littered with approval-seeking traps. The guy who panics when a text goes unanswered and double texts, "Hope I didn't say something wrong." The one who shrinks his ambitions on dates because he's scared of intimidating her. Even the man who abandons his friends the second a new love interest snaps her fingers. These aren't acts of love, they're acts of fear of being alone, of not being enough. The Stoics would have recognized this instantly. Epictetus taught, freedom begins the moment you realize someone else's opinion of you doesn't have to become your reality. Practical shift: next time you're tempted to people please, ask the Aurelian question: what's the cost of this approval? Maybe it's stifling your true thoughts to keep the peace. Maybe it's pretending to like a band you can't stand. Every time you choose authenticity over accommodation, you're not just preserving your dignity, you're broadcasting a quiet confidence that's catnip to the right people. Because here's the secret women won't admit: nothing's more thrilling than earning the respect of a man who doesn't hand it out freely. History's most magnetic men, from Lincoln to Mandela, weren't universally liked. They were universally respected. They understood a truth the Stoics carved in stone: your integrity isn't up for vote, so speak your mind when it matters. Walk away when you must, and let attraction grow in the space where approval-seeking used to live. Imagine two men on first dates. One pushes for physical intimacy too soon, his hands lingering, his jokes laced with innuendo, his texts after brimming with not-so-subtle suggestions. The other takes his time focusing on conversation, letting tension build naturally, more interested in who she is than what he can get. Who do you think she'll trust enough to see again? This isn't about playing games, it's about understanding a fundamental truth. Patience isn't just virtue in dating, it's power. The 20th law, mastering delayed gratification, separates men who chase fleeting validation from those who build lasting attraction. The Stoics practiced this through ascesis, discipline, training in desire. Epictetus compared impulsive men to dogs leaping for scraps. The moment you see pleasure, attack it like a beast. Modern dating culture encourages this beast mode mentality: swipe, match, meet, escalate, repeat. But the Stoics offered a radical alternative. What if pleasure isn't the goal but the test? Not denying desire but mastering its timing. Think of Marcus Aurelius refusing feasts during wartime, not because he disliked food, but to prove hunger couldn't control him. Apply that to dating. The man who can enjoy a woman's company without rushing physical milestones isn't just respectful. He signals something far more compelling: self-possession. Scientific studies back this. The famous marshmallow test showed kids who resisted eating one treat now to earn two later grew into more successful adults. Dating works the same way. The guy who invests in emotional connection before physical intimacy triggers a psychological phenomenon called effort justification. The more someone works for something, the more they value it. Women don't resent waiting, they resent feeling like checkboxes on a conquest list. Contrast two scenarios. One man texts after a date, "Let's skip dinner next time and just come over." Another plans a hike to her favorite spot, packs her favorite snacks, and lets physical chemistry unfold organically. Which approach tells her she's more than a target? Here's where most men misunderstand delayed gratification. It's not about withholding affection or manipulating timelines. It's about alignment, letting physical intimacy grow from genuine connection rather than forcing it as proof of interest. The Stoics called this sympatheia, the natural flow of relationships when ego isn't steering. Practical example: a third date where the conversation runs so deep you forget to kiss goodnight, but the unresolved tension makes her text first the next morning. That's the magic of patience. History's greatest lovers, from Casanova to Byron, weren't celebrated for speed but for savoring. Casanova's memoirs spend pages describing the anticipation before a single touch. Modern dating has lost this art. The man who rediscovers it, who understands that delayed gratification isn't denial but amplification, holds an unfair advantage. Because when every other guy is rushing toward the finish line, the one who enjoys the race becomes unforgettable. Seneca warned, "Hasten slowly." In dating, that means recognizing the irony. The less desperate you are for immediate results, the more permanently desirable you become. Not because you played hard to get, but because you proved you know the difference between hunger and greed. And that's a man worth waiting for. The ancient Stoics didn't swear casual promises. They treated their word as an unbreakable oath, a reflection of their integrity. Epictetus, who began life as a slave, held that a man's character is measured by how he keeps his commitments when no one's watching. Fast forward 2,000 years and nothing's changed. Reliability isn't just practical, it's seductive. Women don't fall for men who say grand things. They fall for men who do what they say consistently without fanfare or reminders. Consider two men planning a weekend getaway. One texts, "We'll definitely take that trip to the mountains. I'll book everything soon." Then life gets busy, the weeks pass, and his promises dissolve into apologies. The other doesn't overpromise. He simply sends a confirmation number 2 days later with "cabins booked." Trail maps look epic. Who earns her trust? Words are cheap, action is currency. The Stoics called this synkatathesis, the discipline of aligning your speech with your conduct. When your yes means yes and your no means no, you're not just dependable, you're rare. Marcus Aurelius ruled Rome with a simple mantra: let your deeds be your vows. In modern terms, the guy who shows up on time, who follows through on the smallest favors, who doesn't need a second reminder to water her plants while she's away. He's not just checking boxes. He's proving something deeper, that his word is an extension of his identity. Women notice this subconsciously. A man who keeps trivial promises, "I'll call at 8," and does signals he'll keep serious ones too. Here's where most men stumble. They think reliability is about grand gestures, remembering anniversaries, or planning elaborate surprises. real reliability is built in the mundane. It's texting on my way when you're 5 minutes out. It's rescheduling a date instead of canceling vaguely. It's admitting I overcommitted, let's adjust, rather than ghosting when life gets hectic. These aren't chores, they're tests. Every kept promise, no matter how small, deposits trust into an emotional bank account, and trust is the foundation of desire. History's most revered leaders, from George Washington to Churchill, weren't loved for their charisma alone. They were followed because their men knew their word was iron. Apply that to dating. The man who says, "I'll help you move Saturday," and arrives with a truck and coffee is the man she brags about to friends. Not because he moved boxes, but because he moved her, proving that in a world of flakes, he's a fortress. Practical shift for 1 month. Track every promise you make, no matter how minor. From "I'll text you later" to "let's grab drinks next week." Hold yourself to the same standard you demand of someone you respect. Notice how your confidence grows when your words and deeds align. Because here's the secret women won't tell you: nothing's sexier than a man who doesn't just talk, he does. And that's a language everyone understands. Marcus Aurelius kept a journal not just for self-reflection, but as a field guide to human behavior, documenting patterns in how people lie to themselves, how fear masquerades as anger, how vanity drowns out reason. This wasn't cynicism, it was clarity, and here's why this matters in dating. The man who can observe women without projecting his own desperation or fantasy onto them holds an almost unfair advantage. He doesn't just hear what she says, he understands what she means. The 22nd law isn't about manipulation. It's about removing the distortions of hope and fear to see reality with Stoic precision. Start with the Stoic practice of prosouch, mindful attention. Most men listen to respond, scanning conversations for openings to impress or persuade. The disciplined observer listens to learn. When she mentions an ex, the needy guy hears a threat or opportunity. The Stoic hears data. Does her tone carry resentment or nostalgia? Does she take accountability or cast herself as the victim? These aren't judgments, they're clues to her emotional maturity. Epictetus trained his students to spot contradictions in others' logic, not to criticize, but to navigate relationships with eyes wide open. Apply this. If a woman claims she wants a serious relationship but consistently dates emotionally unavailable men, believe her actions, not her words. The Stoics also mastered apathy in its original sense, freedom from irrational passion. Modern example: a woman cancels last minute with a vague excuse. The reactive man spirals. Was it something I said? Should I double text? The Stoic treats it like a weather report. No drama, just adjustment. He doesn't assume malice or chase closure. He notes the pattern. 1 cancellation is chance, 3 is a strategy. Seneca wrote, "Fate leads the willing, drags the unwilling." Studying human nature means recognizing when you're being led or dragged. Here's the tactical edge: body language never lies. The ancient Stoics were masters of nonverbal cues, knowing posture and micro-expressions often betray true intent. When she leans in during conversation but crosses her arms when discussing commitment, that's valuable intel. When she laughs at your jokes but her feet point toward the door, take the hint. This isn't about playing detective, it's about respecting her enough to take her signals at face value rather than twisting them to fit your narrative. Practical drill. Next social interaction, practice detached observation. Note how people reveal themselves in unguarded moments, how their eyes flicker when boasting, how their voice tightens when deflecting. Then turn that lens inward. Are your own intentions as transparent as you pretend? The goal isn't to become cold, but to replace blind hope with clear vision. Because the man who sees women as they are, not as he wishes them to be, never has to wonder why he's surprised. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic philosopher who trained Epictetus, saved his harshest criticism for men who confused luxury with strength. He watched Rome's elite gorge themselves on delicacies, drown in wine, and flaunt their wealth like peacocks, then asked a piercing question: How can a man who's enslaved to his appetites claim to be free? This is the 23rd law, and it cuts through modern dating's biggest illusions. That flashy cars impress, that binge drinking is confidence, that overspending equals generosity. True attraction isn't about excess, it's about the quiet power of a man who knows exactly how much is enough. Picture two men at a bar. One orders top-shelf liquor for the table, talks loudly about his bonuses, and keeps pushing shots long after the mood has shifted. The other nurses a single whiskey, engages in calm conversation, and switches to water when he's had enough. Who seems more in control, not just of his drinking, but of himself? Women aren't dazzled by consumption, they're wary of it. Excess telegraphs insecurity, a man trying to fill some inner lack with external noise. Rufus saw this clearly. Luxury makes a man soft in good times and helpless in bad ones. The guy who needs 5 drinks to loosen up, he's admitting he can't handle sober connection. The one who brags about his watch, he's begging you to notice him. The Stoics practiced eutaxia, disciplined moderation, not abstinence but mastery. Imagine a first date where one guy splurges on a Michelin-starred dinner, sweating over whether she's impressed. The other takes her to a hidden local spot with phenomenal food, not because it's cheap but because he genuinely loves it. One performance reeks of neediness, the other radiates assurance. Rufus mocked men who adorn themselves like statues, polishing surfaces while their character rusted. Modern equivalent, the Instagrammer posing with rented Lamborghinis. Contrast that with the guy whose profile shows him backpacking or reading in a cafe, activities that cost little but reveal much. Here's the subtle shift: moderation isn't about deprivation. It's about elevating quality over quantity. The Stoic doesn't avoid pleasure, he curates it. A single excellent scotch savored slowly beats 10 gulped shots. A thoughtful gift, a book she mentioned loving as a kid, outshines generic roses. Women detect this selectivity instinctively. A man who indulges mindfully signals something rare, that he chooses rather than being chosen by his cravings. Practical litmus test: next time you're tempted to flex, another round, another boast, another splurge, ask Rufus' question: is this serving my character or compensating for it? The answer separates men who chase validation from those who embody it, because nothing's more attractive than a man who proves, without saying a word, that he's already enough. The ancient Stoics were notorious for their seriousness, but what most people miss is their razor-sharp wit, especially when aimed at themselves. Epictetus, the philosopher who began life as a slave, would mock students who arrived in fancy robes but couldn't answer basic questions. Marcus Aurelius poked fun at his own temper in his journals, calling himself a little soul carrying around a corpse. This wasn't just humility, it was social alchemy. When you can laugh at your flaws without cringing from them, you transform perceived weaknesses into proof of unshakable confidence, and that's catnip to women. Take 2 men on dates. One trips over a chair and immediately stiffens, his face flushing as he scans the room to see who noticed. The other grins, dusts himself off, and deadpans. Well, that's one way to make an entrance. Who seems more at ease in his own skin? Self-deprecating humor, when delivered without a trace of neediness, signals something powerful. I don't need you to validate me, I'm already comfortable with who I am. Women don't fall for perfection. They're drawn to the guy who owns his stumbles with such lightness that they become part of his charm. The Stoics called this premeditatio stultitii, premeditating your own foolishness. Seneca wrote letters joking about his aging body and bad habits, not to fish for compliments but to disarm criticism before it landed. Modern translation: the guy who beats others to the punchline about his receding hairline or terrible karaoke skills isn't putting himself down. He's pulling the rug out from under anyone who might use those things against him. It's not about seeking pity, it's about neutralizing superficial judgments with a shrug and a smile. But here's the delicate balance: Stoic self-mockery never crosses into self-loathing. There's a world of difference between I'm such a disaster with women, which reeks of insecurity, and my dating profile should just say professional overthinker, which acknowledges a quirk without apology. One begs for reassurance, the other invites connection through shared humanity. Think of Marcus Aurelius joking about his insomnia, or Zeno mocking his own clumsiness. Their humor wasn't a mask for shame, it was proof they'd made peace with being human. Practical tip: mine your life for harmless flaws or quirks, then reframe them as punchlines. Burned dinner on a date: I promise I'm better at choosing wine than cooking steak. Awkward silence: and here I practiced my small talk in the mirror. The key is delivery, no eye rolls or nervous laughter, just calm, playful ownership, because when you stop taking yourself so seriously, you give her permission to relax too. History's most charismatic leaders, from Lincoln to Churchill, wielded self-deprecating humor like a secret weapon, not because they lacked confidence, but because they had so much it couldn't be rattled. That's the Stoic lens. Laughter isn't the opposite of strength, it's the ultimate flex of it. So next time you fumble, don't wince, smirk. The right woman won't see a mistake, she'll see a man who's effortlessly, unapologetically real. And that's a rarity worth chasing. Marcus Aurelius ended his days writing reminders to himself in the dim light of a military camp, not about conquests or glory, but about mortality. You could leave life right now, he scribbled. Let that determine what you do and say. That's the essence of the 25th law. Legacy isn't about what you take from the world, it's about what you leave in it. And here's the counterintuitive truth: women aren't just drawn to men who have purpose, they're magnetized by men whose purpose outlives them. Think of two men in their prime. One spends his weekends chasing trends, his social media brimming with designer labels and fleeting moments. The other dedicates Sundays to mentoring kids at the local gym, his Instagram a quiet feed of progress, not his own, but those he's lifting up. Who carries more gravity? Legacy isn't about scale, it's about depth. A woman doesn't fall for a man's resume, she falls for the shadow he casts. The guy building a business isn't just creating wealth, he's proving he can shape the world around him. The artist leaving murals across the city isn't just painting walls, he's leaving proof he was here. That's the allure. A man invested in something beyond his own reflection is a man worth building a life alongside. History's most compelling lovers, from Napoleon to Hemingway, weren't remembered for their charm alone. They were remembered because they made things: empires, novels, revolutions. Even in failure, their ambition was a beacon. Marcus Aurelius knew this. He ruled knowing Rome would outlast him, yet still poured himself into laws and philosophies that echoed centuries later. Modern translation: the guy restoring his grandfather's watch isn't just fixing gears, he's guarding a story. The one teaching his niece to play chess isn't just killing time, he's planting seeds. Women recognize these acts instinctively, not as hobbies, but as whispers of a deeper truth. This is a man who understands time is finite, so he spends it on what matters. Here's where most men misunderstand legacy. It's not about monuments or LinkedIn accolades, it's about the quiet imprint you leave on people. The Stoics called this memento mori, remembering death to sharpen life. Apply it to dating. When a woman hears you talk about the book you're writing, the community garden you're planting, or even the way you speak of your late father's lessons, she doesn't just see you. She sees the generations woven through you, and the ones you might anchor someday. Practical shift. Ask yourself Stoic questions. What will my nephews remember me for? What will my co-workers miss when I'm gone? Then build accordingly. Not for applause, but because a life without legacy is like a voice without an echo. And here's the secret women won't tell you. Nothing's more intoxicating than loving a man who's already loved by the future. There you have it, 25 laws forged in the fires of Stoicism, each designed to shape you into the kind of man who doesn't chase women, but becomes the one they can't resist. From mastering your emotions to embracing discomfort, from leading with virtue to leaving a legacy, These principles aren't just about attraction, they're about evolution. They're the blueprint for a life of unshakable confidence, purpose, and magnetism. Think back to the man you were when you started this journey. Now picture the man you're becoming, the one who handles setbacks with grace, who listens more than he speaks, who radiates calm in chaos, and who builds a life so compelling that women naturally want to be part of it. That's the Stoic difference. It's not about tricks or tactics, it's about transformation. So here's the challenge. Don't just absorb these laws, activate them. Start small, but start today. Maybe it's pausing before you react to a text, or finally booking that solo trip you've been putting off. Maybe it's deleting the apps for a month to practice solitude, or simply standing straighter tomorrow morning. Progress beats perfection every time. The Stoics didn't write these ideas for scrolls to gather dust, they lived them. Now it's your turn. Which law will you implement first? Drop it in the comments below and let's see those first steps. Your future self and the women who'll chase him will thank you. The journey begins now.